So what I'm going to talk about is, that was all very based on empirical data. What I'm going to talk about is really based on anecdotal data, right? What we've seen in our prizes and what we've seen happening. So just really quickly, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. That Ansari X Prize that was mentioned earlier was ours. So in the past, since 1996 when we were launched, we've awarded 4 prizes for about a little over 23 million. And right now, we have active 4 prizes for a little over $52 million in prize purses. So we're looking at the bigger prizes. So when you ask that question, if there's repeat participants, in our prizes, generally not, because they're much bigger prizes, they take a lot of effort, and they're in very different realms. So we don't really have the same repeat. So very quickly, Ansari X Prize, 1996. It was a $10 million prize to put a commercial plane, privately funded commercial spacecraft in space twice in 2 weeks with the equivalent weight of 3 people. And these are important metrics, and we'll get to that. What happened after we did this? Well, we believe that history was made, right? We had 26 teams from 7 nations spend greater than $100 million to win 10. In fact, the winning team spent $26 million to win $10 million. We don't like to see that, to be completely honest. We want our prize purse to be more than the teams are going to spend, but collectively we want to see that leverage. It drove over $1.2 billion in investment, which to us is important. It generated greater than $6 billion consumer impressions, and we are really focused on marketing and media. We'll get into that a little in a second. And we believe that private spaceflight is here. So the Spaceship One is actually hanging in the Air and Space Museum next to Spirit of St. Louis, which is pretty cool in amongst the stealth, but maybe in today's world that it might have been cooler that we actually got a Google Doodle out of it. I don't know which is actually cooler. And everybody knows that, you know, the SpaceX's Dragon capsule just got the contract with NASA. So we believe, and this is a little bit different than data prizes, but we believe that good prizes have some specific attributes. First, obvious, it needs to solve some kind of grand challenge, right? And it needs, within that, to target some set of market failures, right? So you need to identify what those market failures are. This is the criterion evaluation, right? We want it to have as clear and simple objective rules as possible. So, spaceflight, easy, right? The plane either went into space or it didn't. And it did it twice in 2 weeks or it didn't, right? And you can ask the question, why was it twice in 2 weeks? And that was our proxy for saying this is reusable, right? If you can't do it twice in 2 weeks, you're probably replacing a lot of parts. It's probably really expensive. Because we couldn't ask them to tell us how much it was going to cost, because that's really complicated. That's no longer objective, right? That all of a sudden becomes subjective. So we tried to find these proxies. And you could ask, why was it the equivalent weight of 3 people? Equivalent weight of 3 people, because you can imagine a pilot and 2 passengers, or an autopilot and 3 really brave passengers. We want our prizes to be audacious, yet achievable. We joke that the X is the intersection of audacity and achievability. In reality, a little secret, it took a really long time to fund Ansari, so X was the placeholder name for the prize. And then by the time it got funded, the X was branded in there. We just couldn't take it out. So audacious yet achievable. Back to that, Ansari spaceflight, when we first wanted to do it, we had originally hoped to go 100 miles up. And then some really smart people did some thermodynamic, there's a lot of NASA people in here who could tell you what the word is I'm trying to use, calculations, and figured out that 100 miles up was really, really hard. And it wasn't going to happen anytime soon. So people sat down and we said, well, what can we do? Let's make it 100 kilometers. Still 3 digits, still a big number. The US public has no clue what the difference between 100 miles and 100 kilometers is. So it sounds pretty cool, right? But we sat there and we turned those dials. We always say that there's these dials. And we said, how do we make it so that we get that right balance between achievability and audaciousness? We always want to define a problem, but not the solution. And I'll give you an example. We did the Progressive Insurance Automotive X Prize. 100 miles equivalent, 100 miles per gallon equivalent for passenger cars. Okay? We didn't want to tell you what to do. So we didn't care if you were going to show up with a hybrid, a gasoline-powered car, or electric vehicle, right? We didn't care. But somehow we had to figure out how to measure that. Somehow we had to figure out how to compare it. And Consumer Reports actually created a metric for us, this miles per gallon equivalent, so that we could compare against platforms. Because we really, really, really did not want to define the solution, right? We wanted the public to do that. We believe it should be open to teams worldwide. I understand certain challenges, especially launched by the US government, might not be able to be, but we like that. Another key thing for us is for it to be telegenic and marketable. We like to have that one in moment. We like to see that plane go into space. Sometimes we can't get that. We're sequencing the genomes of 100-year-olds. There's not going to be a really winning moment, but it's still marketable, right? Why did we go with 100-year-olds? Because it's pretty, like, it's cool, right? I mean, we could have just picked 100 random people, but there's no backstory. There's nothing to tell. There's nothing to get the public excited. And we believe that getting the public excited really helps the prize. And then for us, it's also very important that there's a follow-on business and market, because we're spending a lot of our time, a lot of other people's money, right? Or 501c3, so people give us money to do this. And we want to make sure, and the teams are spending a lot of money, so we want to make sure that we're working in a field where there's an opportunity for them to make money going on. And we will actually try to help, and this is something to keep in mind if you do prizes. One of the things you can do if you can help the industry afterwards, really helpful. With Ansari, we helped to create the International Spaceflight Federation, which was a trade association, to help them continue. So if you follow those simple guidelines, which are actually very simple when you think about it, prizes do work. One of the things that we always say when we're talking to people, especially from government agencies, is that prizes don't have to be a replacement for what you're doing. It's one tool, and it can really, really complement what you're doing. So if you're already giving out grants or contracts in a specific field, you can also do a prize, and it's just one more incentive for those, now I'm going to call them teams, but for the people that are working in that field. They pay only for successful outcomes, and I'll give you an example of that in a second. This financial leverage, this is why we do it, right? And again, I'll give you an example in a second. And some of these I'll go into a little bit more detail. The new thinkers and approaches. We truly believe that, and we've seen in our prizes, that some really great ideas come from places we wouldn't expect. And again, ours aren't data prizes, but even in data prizes, some organizations that we worked with found that in data prizes that if it doesn't matter if you're solving an earthquake prediction thing or a Netflix thing, the same people could work on it because it's a math problem, right? We like to focus a community around a specific thing. And we actually actively encourage, and maybe we're doing the wrong thing, but we actually encourage collaboration. Both formally and informally, we design collaboration into our prizes. And I'll go into that. We like to mobilize capital. And what we mean here is between our marketing and our media and our collaboration events, we're trying to also bring in venture capitalists, private equity firms, consulting firms, and the whole idea is to create a support mechanism for the teams competing so that they can find the right team members and the right funding mechanisms. And then again, through our marketing and media, we like to try to influence public perception. Nobody believed the private plane could go in space. Only governments can do it, right? So there's no science behind this. And I would love for you to get the data for me so I can like back this up. This is all anecdotal. So, yes. so like dollar signs. So if you go and you give, a lot of you are used to going out and giving traditional grants and contracts, right? And if you look at the life cycle of a grant or contract, you ramp it up at some point, right? And then you have some level of money that you're paying, and then it ends, right? Pretty simple, right? Well, with prizes, it looks a little different, right? So with prizes, you ramp it up. So just so everybody knows, I'm going to be clear. When there's a $10 million prize, or even a $100,000 prize, that's not it. You have operations costs, right? Especially us. If we do a $10 million prize, we can have anywhere from 10 to 30 million depending on the prize and operations costs. Why? Because you have to recruit teams, you have to work with the teams, you have to market it, you have to do the media, you have to have events to get everybody excited. So there is some spend, right? So saying we only pay for successful outcomes is not totally true, but it's some low level spend. Maybe you have like a team summit, maybe you have some kind of conference. And then if somebody wins, you pay it, and then you're done, right? And I have a picture up here of OMSET. This is where we tested our Wendy Schmidt Oil Cleanup X Challenge that you'll hear about in a second. And the reason I put that up there is that we were originally awarding 3 prizes, first, second, and third. Only 2 teams qualified for our really high standards. I always say you have to be 42 inches tall to ride this ride. That's our minimum requirements, which were really, he could tell you, they were hard. They were hard. They were more than double the industry rate. And so even though only 2 teams made it to the top, the rest of the teams still did significantly better than the industry average, just not as good as we wanted them to do. And so back to this point about why do teams compete, we also find that teams compete because of the resources of the competition. This would have been, how much money to use it? $100,000 to test there?
We were there for a week,
yeah. Yeah, $100,000 test there, and they got it as part of the competition. And so even if you didn't win the prize, you got $100,000 of independent, third-party verified data that you could put in your marketing and media campaigns or your business plans or to go to your VCs and get some extra money. So there's a lot there. Plus, nobody knew that we were using the same technologies as Valdez, the last oil spill we had, right? And now the general public knows, and they're demanding that we improve our technologies, right? So just a little bit about financial leverage. This is what we think is really interesting, because you could go out and you can invest in one company and give them $10 million, or you could put a $10 million prize out there and let teams compete and bring you the money, right? So Orteg, this was Lindbergh flying across the Atlantic. But just to give you a couple examples, Progressive Automotive Insurance, this is more what we want to see versus a team spending $26 million to win 10. It's hard to rationalize. So $10 million prize, it was first, second, third prizes. So the winning team spent between $1 and $5 million each, so there was significant upside, and in total the team spent over $100 million.
If I could just add a point,
yeah.
From an economics point of view, this would be viewed as social waste, right? Because what's going on is that basically all these other people are exerting effort, and then only one person is being awarded, and the award prize is actually lower than the effort has been put in. So economists worry a lot about this and sort of say, prices may not be the most efficient mechanism at play. But what we've sort of seen Chris say and what we find out is that from an individual point of view, there's more motives than just the effort expended. There's just a lot of fun and enjoyment. From a firm point of view, you get all these ancillary benefits. So even if you don't win, because you are now competing, you get access to the testing facilities. You get access to new approaches that are being done by competitors. And that has a lot of value in itself. So there is a tension in economics in saying, you know, we care a lot about efficiency and so social welfare. And from a social welfare point of view, pure numbers would say, this is scary, we shouldn't be doing that. But we would have known, right, who the right people are. There's no other way to find those people. And you would have to have wasted, you know, $10 million 10 times over to find these types of things anyway. And so that's the sort of the tension that we have to deal with. And people will sort of push back to you, sort of say, well, look at all this waste. But no, there's a lot of benefits that come along as well from this.
But you've also pushed innovation forward, and that's the same argument you can make for pure R&D.
But no, it's not.
So it's like, is that waste, or have you pushed forward the boundary of knowledge that you didn't have?
No, completely agree.
Well, and how many of the people who submitted actually ended up founding companies, employing people, et cetera? Is there quantitative analysis on that?
We're not.
We have anecdotal from our stuff. You know, like for example, from our Progressive Automotive Insurance X Prize. We probably didn't have the rules exactly right, so they weren't able to go straight into production. It took them a little while. From Ansari, there's a ton of companies out there trying to do it.
If you're going to enter the X Prize, you don't just give up and say, I'll go back to my day job.
No. Right. These are not people who are doing, you know, a data prize that have a day job and they can spend a couple hours a night. These are people that are spending, I mean, a year on it.
we would have spent some of that money anyway.
Right. And this was just a further incentive. I have a great slide that's not in here. If anybody wants to see it, we call it incentive stacking, and it gives all the reasons why people do it, so you can come see me afterwards and I can walk you through. But there's a lot of reasons, and yeah, economists freak out about this stuff, and people always are, is there going to be prize fatigue? And I don't know the answer to that, but I know that there's other reasons why people do it. So again, this sort of looks like your slide, no data behind it. Let's just be clear. Just what I've heard. But now apparently there's data. So the way we look at things, and based on our conversations,
I like the lots.
yeah. Oh yeah, this was not very. If you go out and give a traditional grant or contract, right, you know who to go to, right? You know that general world of people that are going to be able to be successful. And there's a pretty good chance they're going to come up with a pretty good idea, right? And there's a very low chance that they're going to come up with something really crazy. And there's a very low chance they're going to come up with something really bad, right? Because you've done your research and you've talked to them and you've interviewed them and you've done all this. Now, if you do a prize, it looks a little different. And actually, you do have data on this. So if you do a prize, you know, the chance of coming up with something pretty average is a little less because actually, a little secret, we find that really major corporations don't compete for our prizes. Can anybody guess why?
They want to own them. They're afraid.
What was this one?
They want to own them.
No, that's actually not true. They're afraid. That just so, when we do a prize, nobody keeps the IP. The teams keep the IP. We don't keep the IP, and our sponsors don't keep the IP. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. So, go ahead.
That's quite, your last statement there isn't exactly true. There's a big controversy with the Google Lunar X Prize.
Well, yes, that one's a little bit different. Yes.
A lot of people are looking to pull out because Google wants to keep actually all the IP.
Yeah, and we're trying to figure out how to handle that one. But normally, that's you're right. And I'm not fully aware of what's happening there because I'm removed from that. But for the most part, our prize is we don't keep the IP, right? And nor do the sponsors. They're afraid. They're afraid of losing, and they're afraid of winning. And they're afraid of winning because if they win, somebody says, why didn't you do this already? And if they lose, everybody says, how the hell did you get beat by this little guy? Right? So there's, if you do a prize, you have a little bit better chance of getting something crazy and a pretty good chance of getting something totally crazy. And you say, well, what's the value of this? You know, for us, there's a lot of value in that. This is your Jamaican bobsled team, right? Did nothing to advance the sport of bobsledding in terms of technology or breaking records, but did a ton in terms of the marketing and getting people excited about bobsledding. So if you want to talk about diversity, just really quickly, this is our Progressive Insurance Automotive X Prize. We had 136 teams from 11 nations, and this is the high school team, right? And then with Wendy Schmidt, and I know you guys won, but we always have to do this one. We had 38 teams from 4 nations, and one of the teams was a tattoo artist, met some folks, did the design on a napkin, and he came in like 7th place. It was he was in top 10 though, yeah.
He didn't tattoo the design?
No, he drew it. It was a very, actually, I don't have a picture here, but it's actually a very beautiful drawn design, not surprisingly. So this is what we're looking for. We're looking for all this kind of, this diversity. And, you know, a lot of times it's not too far from the industry, right? Because we're doing big things that are taking a lot of investment. But through our collaboration, we're hoping that we can get people to join those teams. So here, this is just my second to last slide, so don't worry, I won't totally bore you guys. But we're trying to strengthen and focus communities, right? So focus, we're trying to get them to focus on a specific problem that we think is important to solve, usually as a stepping stone to something else, right? Because, you know, putting a plane in space was a stepping stone to commercial spaceflight. It wasn't the answer for commercial spaceflight. So this is our Progressive Automotive Insurance. But in terms of strengthening communities, we try to, and Wendy Schmidt was a lot shorter, so it didn't have as many opportunities as our longer prizes. But you can imagine if we're working, if the prize is launched for 3 to 5 to 8 years, we need to figure out how to keep people motivated, right? Help teams succeed. And so what we do is we do a lot of team summits. So once a year we get everybody together in a conference and we allow other people to come in and talk to them and hopefully work with them. And then we also design informal collaboration into it. And an example here is when we did this, we had 7 weeks of on-site testing. Not all at once, but 7 weeks where these teams were at the Michigan International Speedway. And we gave them an option. We said, if you want free garage space, you have to share the garage with everybody else. These big garages, you can imagine at a racetrack, there's big garages with no dividers, right? And if you want private garage space, you have to rent it on your own, right? And you actually have to bring it in. Almost every team picked a free garage space. And what happened? They shared knowledge, they shared tools. One team gave another team a component. One team gave the high school team after the competition a chassis to help them keep going forward. So what we're trying to do is create these things. And then, like I said with Ansari, we created the the International Spaceflight Federation. Now, I don't know how the science works with this. You know, some teams don't want to share anything. Some teams do want to share. But we're constantly looking for ways because we want the whole industry to be successful. And so that, just as my last slide, just to show you a little bit what we're doing going forward, we just launched two, we have 4 launched right now, but we just launched this one in January. And it's tricorder. Does anybody know what a tricorder is? Anybody follow Star Trek? I do not, so it's from Star Trek. The whole point is it's a handheld diagnostic that can diagnose like 15 diseases better than a panel of board certified doctors, right? And this is just pre-registration, so a lot of these teams will drop out, right, because we haven't actually gotten to full registration yet. But right now we have 183 teams from 25 countries. The prize has 3 team summits built in over the 3 years for this collaboration. There's 2 stages, and we often try to do stages. We did it with Wendy Schmidt, did it with Progressive, we do it. And the whole point there is we don't want to make the operations cost too much for us, so we constantly narrow down the teams. Plus, we don't want teams to spend a ton of money, right? We only want those ones that we think are going to go forward. And then there's some interim incentives. And one of those interim incentives we just launched, which is this Nokia Sensing X Challenge, which is to help create the sensors that will measure to help diagnose. But the idea is we want to give them an interim incentive. And we fully expect the team that wins this will not win this. But at least it gets another community working. And with these ones, we partnered with Qualcomm and Nokia. They're both very motivated. It's not in their business, right? But I would not be surprised if Qualcomm or Nokia ends up being a health provider. Not a health provider, but in the health industry, right? So that is all I have. I guess we could take questions a little later. But feel free to pull me aside if you want to see the incentive stacking or any other stuff. And again, I'm looking forward to learning more empirical data because everybody always asks me and I don't have any. Just what works.